Hello, everybody, and welcome to video number 2, or chapter 2 of Reality Atlas, where Scott and I are discussing Scott's book, Sacred Geometry, Philosophy, and Worldview. So today it's chapter 2. Let's dive right in. Hi, Scott. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. So in this chapter, we're unpacking sacredness, which is the title of the chapter. And it's kind of an argument that I've constructed, kind of taking you through it. Maybe I can kind of summarize that here for you.
Can I hijack your intro, Scott? Because
Sure.
I feel compelled to read out the first sentence,
Please.
just to give everybody a flavor of what you're inviting us into.
Yeah.
And then I'll give you back the stage. But you say unpacking sacredness, right? Explaining why the qualitative use of geometry can be experienced in consciousness as a transpersonal, palpably sacred experience, completely independent of the baggage of religious or spiritual traditions, is the aim of this chapter. That's a perfect opener, if I even say so myself,
In fact, that
So
right
I'll
here is
leave it
the
to
kind
you.
of motivation that I had for writing this book, is trying to
Mhm.
explain like why geometry can be perceived as sacred. I mean, I've had that experience so profoundly. And I think this was kind of like after we did our in-person workshop in Ireland, the last one, that kind of got me on this trajectory of which ultimately resulted in writing this book, because I wanted to figure out like how is that explainable, And what I've done here is I've constructed kind of all of the pieces that kind of guide you to an inevitable conclusion, which is at the end of this chapter. So let me just take you through it. So geometry is the extension of number in space. Okay, it's a subset of math, ultimately, which is really just the study of the symbolic relationships between numbers. Okay, and math has many branches and topics and so on and parts to it, but that's not what we're getting into in sacred geometry. But it's important to understand that this is an aspect of math, and all of those different kinds of math, Euclidean, non-Euclidean, Riemannian, complex math, all these different things, they're all just different aspects of the same underlying reality, which is mathematics or geometry, right? So there's a quote I put in here by Henri Poincaré, who's a famous mathematician. He says, "One geometry cannot be more true than another. It can only be more convenient." And so that kind of gets to the idea of what math is. It's all true. And they're all just different aspects of the same reality. And it's unique in that there is a truth behind it that people in different time periods and different cultures through the history of science have, explored and added a little bit of knowledge to. But it's something that's there before us, you see, and they're uncovering it and discovering it ultimately, rather than inventing it on their own. You see, it's something that
something that's there before us,
Yeah,
You
exactly.
speak about that a lot, Scott, and I don't want to get ahead of you now, but one of the things I love about your book, by the way, are all the quotes that you've peppered through it, like those quotes. I sort of think you could nearly treat them like Zen koans, those Zen cards that you read and they can kind of like bring you into a deep meditation, just reflecting upon them. But you had one here by Plotinus, numbers existed before the objects described by them, which really speaks to that idea that number kind of comes before everything in a way. And Jung also spoke to that idea, didn't he? That at some almost pre-existing level, there's the archetype of pure number, out of which everything that arises into manifestation comes. Is that fair?
It comes like Jung was like putting it in a special place even before the archetypes.
Yes, exactly.
And then from the archetypes comes the human psyche later, you see?
Yeah.
And so this is like the deepest level in a way, math is. And so mathematicians are somehow drawn to that truth, drawn to trying to understand that truth. And we're actually becoming mathematicians in a way, kind of like, but we're not going into the truth of it so much as we're drawn to the beauty of it through the qualitative aspects of geometry. We're admirers of it, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't have to necessarily understand it all, you know, mathematically. Although
Which I don't.
That does add a whole other layer of beauty, in my opinion. But you don't have to, because what's so wonderful about this is you don't need to go through that whole trip of understanding the, you know, like the left brain side, because you can go directly there and experience the beauty of it.
Can I ask you something, Scott, about that very point you're making?
Yeah.
You know, I'm very passionate, as you know, about crop circles, and very often I'll like meet people who will have no idea what mathematics is. They won't even have an idea what geometry is, right? But for some reason, when they gaze upon a particular crop circle, they are completely and utterly captivated and captured by it in a way that's very difficult to explain, actually, that there's something really remarkable happening deep inside the person.
I think it's a deep level of recognition that when you see that geometry and you don't have words for it usually, because it's undeniable that it moves you, right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do with this book is try to give you words for it, to try to give you a framework for explaining that, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to get into all of that in the course of this little journey. But
amazing.
But one of the aspects of geometry that's kind of amazing is that in the legal world, it's unpatentable. It's specifically exempted from being patentable, because
I didn't know that.
In law, they understand that like a triangle is something that you can't claim that you invented the triangle and now everyone has to pay you royalties on that invention, because it comes before us. It was there already. And so just on a practical level, not on a philosophical level, but the legal system is like, well, yeah, we know that you can't claim geometry as your own. Which says something about the quality of geometry itself, right? Doesn't it? I think that's overlooked. Like, what else is like not patentable? You know, like that's kind of an exception. Like, well, we can't do that because that transcends everybody. And like another thing is mathematical equations can't be patented. Like E equals mc squared. Einstein couldn't patent that and say, now anyone who utters that has to pay me money. No, it's not possible, right? So it's because of things like Kepler, who's the one who made the laws of planetary motion. He said, geometry existed before the creation. It is co-eternal with the mind of God.
I love that one.
He was a religious man. He lived in the 16th, early 17th century. And so he's equating it with God. But just like Plotinus, who lived 2,000 years before him, they both agree that it comes before the world in some way. Another aspect of geometry is that it's in some way universal. And so if we were to meet aliens, real aliens who didn't just have funny ears or funny nose, like on Star Trek, but if they were really alien, we wouldn't know how to communicate with them. And so the best bet would be either geometry or music, because that's number in space and number in time. And number transcends everybody. So
and all places, Scott, doesn't it? Like, the principles of geometry would be the same in like the furthest galaxies. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. A pentagram would be a pentagram in another galaxy, because it would be based on geometry, which comes before culture.
Where like the past tense of the verb to be in French may not be as readily understood in the furthest reaches of the galaxy. But, and I joke a little bit, but I do like the analogy of geometry as a language, but also you know, we sometimes talk about it as like the ultimate language or the supreme language or the language of all that is, you know,
Yeah.
or the language of the creative principle itself, which
But
is,
and so this is wonderful you're bringing that up, because geometry is a great metaphor, is a language, and I bring that up in this chapter, and I state that languages are maps, because I want to get into the what is a language. If geometry is a language, then what do all languages have in common, right?
yes,
So I kind of took a little tour into logic here, and I just kept it at a 30,000 foot level here to just give you the executive summary
of what a language is.
of what a language is and what logicians have discovered about language. And so in 1930, Kurt Gödel, who is this probably one of the smartest people to ever live, he came up with this incompleteness theorem. And it boils down to basically that math cannot be complete. If it's consistent, it cannot be complete. And so there's something missing in all math. And then just a couple of years later, 3 years later, Alfred Tarski, who is another logician, kind of built on Gödel's work, and he made the undefinability theorem. And I go into these kind of in detail in the book. But what Tarski is saying is that arithmetical truth cannot be defined in arithmetic. In other words, language cannot represent its own semantics or meaning. And so I think an analogy is helpful here to understand. And so I'll just take the example of an apple. So when you were a kid and your parent held up an apple and they said, "This is an apple," and you're like, "Apple." But if you were in another country, let's say you're in Mexico, your mother holds it up and she says, "Manzana." And you're like, "Manzana." And so obviously the word that is chosen to represent that is going to be different in different languages. But the meaning exists not in the language. The language doesn't hold the meaning, it's consciousness that always does. So it's your conscious association with those sounds uttered that you recall. When you recall the language, you're like, "Oh, apple, I know what that means." It's an invention of a kind of our monkey mouth, right, to say apple in that way. And then we have long ago associated that with the fruit. And so languages are pointers. They're maps, but they're not the landscape. They're not the territory. They're just a map.
This is what language is.
Yeah, so language is like a map of like a sailor made a map of the coastline, and we know that it's helpful because we know where we are in the grand scheme of the territory there. But the map is not the actual place, is it? It's just a simulation of that. So the the real place is only held in consciousness. That's what math is missing. Is the meaning. It's missing the qualitative aspect of understanding, right? And so that's where
Scott,
consciousness is part of it.
Can I jump in here a little bit, right? In terms of like, you know, I'm probably displaying my own sort of slow learning capabilities, you know, but I'm hoping that I'm helping some of the viewers get down with what you're saying, you know? So like, I totally understand what you're saying about language, right? Being a map, for example. You know, I understand that language is like different in Mexico than it is in America, and that the apple is the same in both places, right? It's the quality of the apple to the kid is going to be the same. I kind of get all that, right? But you said something like arithmetic can't be used to understand itself, something like that. And I'd love to ask you maybe about that, because I just missed it. It didn't totally land, but it feels like it's an important point. Can I ask you about that again?
Yeah, so Tarski's theorem states that arithmetical truth cannot be defined in arithmetic.
Okay.
So like no amount of math can prove itself. The proof is outside of math. It's in your awareness.
Okay. And what was the Gödel thing? It was like, if it's if it's consistent, it can't be complete. And if it
Yeah.
is the reverse of that true? Like if it's complete, it can't be consistent or something
That's
like
also
that?
true. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It can't both be true at the same time. But I would
Okay.
say that math is consistent, but it's incomplete. It's missing something.
Mm-hmm.
And that what it's missing is kind of what Tarski was talking about. It's missing meaning.
Can I go out on a limb here, right? Just to use some simple geometry that makes sense to me, because these are heavy principles, you know, and sometimes the intellectual ideas, they take me a while to get to be honest, you know. But so, and maybe I'm simplifying this, so forgive me if I don't want to water this down, but like when we think about like mathematics having something missing, I always think about pi. I always love this idea of the relationship of a circle to its diameter. Yes. And it's this gorgeous thing called pi, which is magic number, and it goes forever and it never ends. And I also believe it never repeats, but just even thinking about this number that never ends, that's something I can instantly understand and go, whoa, hang on a minute. Like, what's missing in that? Like, what do you mean it never ends? All the quantum computers on the planet can't complete the simple relationship of a diameter to its circumference. Really? Yeah. Am I off track, or am I on track with that analogy?
You're on track, and it's like every year new computer projects are done to try to calculate pi out to more digits, and I think they're at 50 trillion now. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, people keep trying to figure out if they'll ever come to the end of it. And they never will. And but it's kind of like part of the human spirit to try to explore that and try to find out if you can ever come to the end of it and see if it repeats or if there's any pattern there. And yeah, it's kind of like in a way, it's kind of like a fool's errand, because we can see that it's never going to end. Why do we keep doing that?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the arithmetical truth isn't in the arithmetic. No matter how much computing you apply to solving pi, you're never going to get there because it's not in there.
Yeah.
But what we can see with geometry at a glance is that you've got a circle and it's got a diameter. The relationship between them is pi.
Yeah.
And I get that. I can get that. And you can get that. We can understand that. And we're just going to call that mystery pi.
Yeah.
Even though we'll never find the truth of that in the arithmetic.
Yeah. But if you actually stop for a minute and meditate on that, it almost is like a magic carpet that takes you far out there, I find. You know, like so what? Like, you don't think about infinity, something really never ending. You're like, what's with that? Like, just let that bake your noodle for a while. It's a kind of cool trip, actually.
It's kind of like
to reflect upon.
Imagine you're on a beach and you have a stick that's in the sand.
Yeah.
And you tie a rope on that stick and you hold on to the end of the rope and you're like, okay, I see where the stick is and I see where I am. And we could measure that. We'll say it's 1 unit. Mm-hmm. And then if I walk around in a circle, the relationship of how long that circle is to that, is related to pi. It's actually the diameter, not the radius, but
sure. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't want to take you off track.
That simple act of walking around in a circle is kind of like undefinable in math. We can never get to the end of it. And yet, what are you talking about? I walked around in a circle. I get it. You know,
like every coin in your pocket is a circle. It's really easy. It shouldn't be this big, huge, incredible mystery, right? But it is.
But you see, that's where it requires consciousness to get the big picture and go, I understand what we're talking about with pi.
The
relationship of the curved to the straight.
And
that's all
there is. So you were, sorry, Scott, I kind of jumped in there, but I'm trying to make this a conversational vibe for everybody rather than, just
great,
a book review.
I appreciate that very much.
But just to try to give you a hook, I think we were at where you were explaining about languages. You were explaining about languages being like a map, and they're not the territory. And so I'm just looking here. I think we're at, you are the territory. Is that where we got to?
Right. And so, like, we're talking about the circle and the diameter, or we're talking about 1 + 1 = 2, or what a triangle is. You get that. You know that. Okay.
Yeah. That's the stuff that's easy.
That's the amazing mystery of math, is that you understand that, But math, no matter how much math you put down, it doesn't have that understanding in it. It doesn't have that truth in it.
Oh, I get it now. I
It's only
get it.
you that
Pennies dropping.
understands
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
It's only you that knows what a triangle is.
I get you. I
Okay.
get you.
And that's,
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
has implications for artificial intelligence systems that are classical, in that they'll never understand anything at all.
Mhm.
They're only a simulation that they don't understand like we do, because they're not
I get it.
conscious. But
I get it.
I actually wonder if quantum computers might exhibit a kind of general intelligence like we do. But that would only be true if it turns out that the neurons in our brain exhibit quantum phenomena, because then they'd be similar in how consciousness is coming into the visible realm. But that's something for another talk.
Sure.
Anyway, so
you are the territory.
Going on,
what does that mean?
From understanding the relationship consciousness has to math now, that it's only in consciousness that you have the meaning, right? So when we talk about math and geometry, I'm going to just read this sentence here. There is no such thing as a point, 0D, a line, 1D, a square, 2D, a cube, 3D, tesseract, 4D, or any other such ideal form in the material world, no matter how many or how few dimensions it occupies in the mind. Okay, Euclid defined a line as length without breadth. Can you imagine that? A line it's long, it has a length, but it has no thickness, it has no breadth. But that's impossible. You can't do that in the real world. You can't draw a line that has no width.
Yeah.
And so a line or a triangle or any form exists in the mind, but it's not in the world. This is very important to understand.
Yeah, let's take me through it slowly, okay? So like I know what a line is, okay? I can understand what Euclid is saying. He's saying like it's a distance between 2 points, is it?
Yeah.
But it has no breadth, so there's no thickness to it. So if it had no thickness, then you couldn't draw a line. If you can't draw a line without a pencil hitting the paper. So it's like it's a paradoxical statement or something. Yeah.
Well,
but
we all know what a line is.
Why is this so important?
We all know what a line is, and when we draw a line on paper, we get the fact that it's somehow an approximation of an ideal line. Sure. But of course, if we were to have a microscope and look at the paper, we would see that I wrote here that it's a craggy streak of graphite smeared across a landscape of cellulose. Okay. So
go Wordsworth.
If you zoom in, it would be this massive river of graphite. It wouldn't be this ideal
smooth line
that has no breadth. And so geometry is like that. It's not really in the world. If you put 3 rocks down on a beach, we all see a triangle. But there's no triangle in the world. There's just 3 rocks. And you're seeing a triangle? Show me the triangle. Show it.
Your mind makes the triangle.
Yeah. Your mind tunes into this other domain, actually.
I get it. I get it.
I make another analogy for people that know about graphic design, like Adobe makes Photoshop and Illustrator. And so Photoshop represents everything in pixels, which is kind of like the world in my analogy. Like the world is made of atoms, and so you have all these pixels of the world. And Illustrator represents things in math. And so the cool thing about Illustrator is when you make a design in Illustrator, you can zoom in and out indefinitely, and it can be independent of the resolution of pixels. The nice smooth curve or typography that you have in Illustrator will look nice and crisp in a vector form, no matter how much you zoom in, because it's not part of the world in this metaphor. It's not part of the pixel equation at all. It transcends pixels because it's made of math. just like math transcends the world, right? It's not in the world. It's kind of like Illustrator is to the Photoshop of the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of designers here and that will work for them. But I mean, if I'm on track, but I absolutely love the analogy you give of the three rocks on the beach, you know, because my simplistic mind totally gets that one. And I can even see myself doing it. It's like you put three stones down and you say, Geoff, what shape is that? I'm going to go triangle, you know,
Well, yeah,
but I
see,
realize what I'm doing is I'm formulating that in my consciousness. You know, it's like there is no triangle. I get it. I really get that, you know.
Yeah.
So geometry is transcending the world, and it's actually a formulation in consciousness. It feels like my consciousness. Maybe that'll expand later on, but at the moment I would go, oh yeah, it's clear as day. There is a triangle forming. Where is it forming? Not on the beach, but in my mind. I totally get that.
That's why you can actually do geometry.
Transcends the world.
You can do geometry on a beach with a stick.
Yeah.
And we know that these aren't like ideal lines, but we you know, it's good enough. You get the idea. Yeah.
Totally. But I understand how the metaphor applies to Photoshop and Adobe as well, you know, and the pixel ID. I do.
Yeah.
You know, but
so like
once one of these examples works for you, you know, you'll get the point you're making.
Yeah, because they're all just different routes up the mountain, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like there was this logician called Ludwig Wittgenstein who lived 1889 to 1951, and he said we could present spatially an atomic fact which contradicted the laws of physics, but not one which contradicted the laws of geometry. Now, do you understand that, Geoff?
We could present spatially an atomic fact which contradicted the laws of physics, but not one which contradicted the laws of geometry. God, if I was in an exam now and I had to write on that, I don't think I'd come up with the right answer.
Okay,
well, tell me, what is the right answer?
Okay, the right answer is just what we're talking about here. This is exactly what we're talking about, that there could be something in atoms that like makes us revise our law of physics because it can't be explained by our theories, but it could never be that no matter what happens with atoms, that it could contradict geometry.
So Scott, actually, just to summarize, I'd love to ask you about that quote again. So I'm beginning to understand more this idea that the laws of geometry can never be changed or compromised, unlike physics, right? So would you just give a summary review of that quote again? Because I'm much more further along with you now at understanding it.
Yeah, it's like we might learn more about geometry. We might get new theorems or more detail on it, but it doesn't seem like there's anything that could ever contradict geometry. Now, Wittgenstein was saying like we could present a spatially an atomic fact which contradicted the laws of physics, you know, and that would cause us to revise physics maybe.
That's the whole scientific vibe, isn't it? You find new information, you upgrade your models.
Yeah, like with the Higgs boson, it kind of made the physicists kind of rethink the relationship between all the particles and how they're related to that. But none of that ever caused them to rethink geometry. See, it's a given. It's a fundamental. It's beyond the Higgs boson.
Yeah.
So I just want to read a little bit from the part of the book here to try to capture the kind of clear thinking that I had there. By the way, I feel like when I'm writing, it's a different intelligence that's coming out of me than when I'm talking. When I'm talking, I'm very imprecise and I'm very loose and I'm on the spur of the moment. But when I write, then it's a different kind of clarity that sometimes shines through.
That's interesting.
Let me just read some of this. Geometry and math are not relative to the perspective of an individual mind, nor the cultural context in which they are assessed. In other words, geometry and math are a special or pure form of truth, which is absolute. If geometry does not exist in the material world and remains independently true in all conceivable times, places, and cultures, then where does it exist? we must necessarily posit another domain beyond the material world to explain the intelligibility of mathematics and geometry. How else can we explain that we understand mathematics and geometry, even if some understand more than others? There must be some domain of reference that all who understand a concept as simple as a triangle are all universally accessing. There exists another domain which is populated by geometry and mathematical entities, which are non-spatial and non-temporal, immaterial in nature. Amazingly, consciousness has the capability of accessing this universally intelligible domain. And so that's kind of where I leave this chapter, is that we inescapably must conclude that there must exist another domain where all of this math and geometry exists.
Beyond the material, is it?
Beyond the material, beyond human culture, beyond any location or circumstance.
Would that speak to, I'm very interested in mandalas, and I love the traditional mandala work of the Tibetan tradition, the Buddhist tradition. And when those adepts were kind of like making their mandalas out of sacred geometric shapes, basically, they were not just revering their gods or their deities, but they were actively kind of coming into harmony with the frequencies of the deities that they were kind of communicating with, and so they did enter like different domains, different worlds. Would that be an example of what you're talking about, like in terms of the application of geometry to access these other domains?
You're noticing that those adepts were able to access this other domain that wasn't in the room with them. It wasn't in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It somehow transcends this.
Yeah.
And yes, they're doing that, and they're doing that simply with geometry.
Yeah.
And they clothed it in their tradition, in the characters of their tradition, or in the meaning that they take from this.
And
that might be particular to their time and place.
Yeah. And a kind of a contemporary version of that, which I've experienced over and over again, is like when I meditate upon and make mandalas upon the geometry of crop circles, quite specifically, like it's incredible to me the different kind of like experiential happenings that occur when I sort of like meditate on different geometric forms, like they're so different in their tone, the feeling, the vibrations that you inhabit when you go deep into these meditations. Different shapes have different qualities, is my point, which I know is something you subscribe to.
Yeah, they do have different characters, but one thing they all have in common is that they're all kind of taking you into this other domain.
Yeah.
No matter which archetype I meditate on or use, it gets me to this new place. It gets me, it helps me transcend all of my culture, my body, my mind. And it's interacting with this kind of domain that is in some way more real than the material. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, totally. And I have to read the Stanislav Grof quote, because, he's like one of my biggest heroes, and I've trained with him for 15 years. So I'm delighted to see his quote. Each of us can manifest the properties of a field of consciousness that transcends space, time, and linear causality. Like that's so Stan. And I totally understand that quote, and in fact, you see, for my journey with sacred geometry, I seem to find it very easy to slip out of this everyday world, and actually experience something huge, way beyond anything that happens in my day-to-day world. So much so that it's almost become normal for me to have those experiences.
You and me both, but we have to kind of try to keep one foot in our past experiences to try to relate to others who aren't, haven't taken the red pill yet, you know, and haven't experienced what they haven't, maybe they haven't experienced the sacredness of geometry, and they just think, we're talking all this crazy nonsense. But it's something that we can't explain. It is something that has to be experienced.
Yeah, that's very true. I have to say, Scott, that's very true. And I actually love that quote. You know, it's not something that can be explained. It has to be experienced, you know.
But here I am trying to explain it, because it's kind of like those people who are trying to solve pi, you know. I'm trying to explain it as best I can, because I find that it gives you a framework. You know?
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting to me? It's like, you know, all the great teachers, like I love Eckhart Tolle, for example, because I think he's a brilliant kind of path maker, where he uses words, he uses thoughts, he uses ideas to kind of get you out of thoughts, to get you out of ideas, to get you out of thinking. And the other guy I'm really loving at the moment is Rupert Spira, who like is all about non-dualism and beyond the mind and beyond, you know, into the infinite absolute. But yet his work is actually really, really heady, paradoxically. Do you know what I mean? And also very helpful, you know. And so I'm kind of like, I'm trying to reconcile this. It's like, I'm trying to actually get a break from the incessant kind of like, you know, permutate, like rolling of my mind, you know, which is just kind of keeping me in this kind of pattern. And it's only when I kind of escape from that pattern of my mind patterns that I can kind of feel a little bit more expansive or whatever, you know. And so I'm kind of, but when I listen to these teachers, you know, it's all a lecture on this, and there's this idea, and it's like, you know, non-dualism is not this, and the Vedantic tradition says that, you know, it's all but actually what they're walking you to is kind of like the edge of the cliff, so you can hand glide off.
The way I visualize that is, you have to go on your journey, which takes effort, right? You have to go on that journey of 1,000 miles, and it begins with a single step, but you have to take it to get to the edge of your boundary, and only then can you transcend it and realize that you didn't need to go anywhere.
Exactly.
But you can't avoid the journey. You can't avoid doing all those things to get there, you know.
Exactly. Totally. So, and I was trying to somehow, and I didn't achieve it at all, but I was trying to say, I'm very grateful for the way you have decided to explain that thing that can't be explained, if you like, even though that's paradoxical. Do you know what I mean? Because it does help you get closer to experiencing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it also helps you to put your experience that you've had
in a context
that makes sense.
That's a better way of putting it. That's a better, because when you come back off the mountain, and normally I'm just like, whoa, wait, what? What just happened there? No frame of reference at all. When I read your book, I kind of go, oh my God, that actually sounds really like that thing that happened that I couldn't explain, you know? Exactly. So it is helpful on the return journey. Yeah, so exciting. I'm looking forward to getting into the maps and stuff. But will we hold it there, because we've come beautifully to the close of chapter 2, and we'll leave our dear viewers here and see you in the next video for chapter 3.